Anyway, well, I thought this was another one that, look, I'm looking at how do you shorten sales cycle? So this one caught my eye, speeding up the sale with contract AI software. And I know we've talked about this in the past. I just want to put a finer point on it. The sales function at any enterprise encompasses a vast array of duties ranging from discrete contractual tasks to overarching strategy. Look, let's be simple about this. Legal, pretty much a bunch of stick in the mud people just slow everything down. I don't like the way that T was crossed, that I dotted looks a little funny. They'll come up with anything to slow everything down. And so everything from creating a contract, drafting it, monitoring the progress, keeping them moving forward, approving it, and delivering the contract. I'd never really heard this term, and there's a company called Own It. Love that. Own It owns it. Own It has something called the Contract Lifecycle Management, a CLM. It's a solution that helps with end-to-end automation of the entire contract management process, allowing for a more efficient sales function and better insight into sales data. Now, would you consider this, Will, a sales acceleration tool?
I would have to see if it actually accelerates sales, or I consider something that's sales acceleration if it literally closes or reduces the time from contact to deal closed. Now, this might remove some of the burden. It might be a better experience for the buyer, but I'm not necessarily, and we're talking semantics here, clearly. It's my opinion on a semantic, but I don't necessarily consider companies and and software and tools that just make things easier sales acceleration if they're not squeezing the cycle length. So this might squeeze the cycle length. It might go through it all and it might take just as long, but you come out the other end and you know that the I's have been dotted and the T's have been crossed. So it might be more of a covering your own arse for mistakes as opposed to speed of sale. I don't know. I'd have to experiment with it to answer your question.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. The AI can actually catch phrases, clauses in there that they'll highlight for the contract person. But the fact that they highlight those and maybe call them out faster will probably speed up the contractual process, maybe a little more. I just think it's a fascinating idea. I was reading the book, I think I've mentioned to you before, the book Atomic Habits. Mm-hmm. Atomic Habits by, I think it's James Clear. Great book. I mean, just great book. One of my favorite books from 2020. And in there, he talks about a guy named Dave Brailsford. I think he's from your part of town. This is the guy that took over the British cycling team. Mm-hmm. And he came up with something called the aggregation of marginal gains. Aggregation of marginal gains, which means find little pieces of improvement everywhere. And so this to me is kind of the aggregation of marginal gains. Maybe we can use the software just to accelerate. Maybe it'll only improve one day, but maybe that begins to add up.
Yeah, I agree, and stuff like that on a basic principle. I'm not bashing this organization; it is great, but the downside to some of this is when you go for that marginal gains, or you go for this like the Japanese like Kaizen approach of continual improvement. Mm-hmm. When you don't create the software, when you don't own it, you might end up logging into 27 things to get a deal done when just a phone call can solve a problem. That's my only caveat to a lot of this. I find that sometimes it's easier just to get on the phone with someone who's the expert on the legal team and just solve the issue, as opposed to try and use tools and software to avoid the phone. And I find myself sometimes doing that and realizing, hey, a phone call solves this. Why am I faffing around?
This leads me to believe, Will, that maybe in your past you've had some problems with a legal team or something, contractual issues, and maybe you're scarred by that experience, which makes you not believe in what this product is offering. Could that be it?
Quite the opposite. The deals I do, Victor, are that large that they take a full legal team to support them and get them through, because I'm dealing with these public companies, mate, and it's shareholder money on the line here. And the deals again are that vast that one clause, one issue, it could topple a whole organization, a whole enterprise, mate. So that's where a lot of this comes from.
I hear you. Hey, by the way, Will, have you ever heard this phrase? Switching topics here: asynchronous demo asset.
No.
And I was interviewing Joe Caprio from a company called GetReprise.com. Have you interviewed him yet?
I have not, no.
We were talking demos, and he talked about asynchronous demo asset, to which I said, what? What's an asynchronous demo asset? And we talked about this in the past, or at least I mentioned it with a guy named Garen Hess, who actually does video recorded demos that he gives to the champion, and then that demo is passed on to other people within an organization. And that's what he means by asynchronous. So I wanted to highlight this new phrase. because I think it's interesting how more companies are jumping into the demo game, trying to figure out how do we propagate our demo into an organization, get it deeper downfield so we can get our message heard. So I think it's interesting. By the way, great website, great content, worth looking at.
Amazing. Well, we'll link that in thisweekinsales.com. And I've got one final thing to report on before we wrap up. So last week we discussed conversion.ai. So I signed up, they got $30 of my money or $29 of my money. And Victor, it's pretty good. I was actually surprised. Now, I had to go, the point of the service is they'll write copy for you, whether it's for marketing copy, sales email copy, website copy, things like this. And you type in the elements that you want to promote, product names, all these kind of things. You essentially give it a style of copy to work against. And both of us last week were slightly not hypercritical, but we were guarded with our kind of how excited we were for this kind of a product or service, because it's very complicated and it's very difficult to provide kind of a decent output. We did pretty good.
We had a muted excitement.
Muted excitement, nice. That sounds like a political way of describing. I was also trying to find a political way to describe it, and I couldn't get the words out. But yeah, it worked quite well. So I don't know if it's fully recommended from This Week in Sales. Obviously, Victor would have to take a look at it as well. But it's worth experimenting with. And it opened my eyes that perhaps some of these technologies, perhaps they could replace an intern. Maybe they can't replace a full-time copywriter or an expert sales professional at this point. But perhaps they could, if you're hiring interns, graduate interns who don't know nothing other than how to do a beer bong and get drunk and party, maybe these kind of tools could kind of remove some of those roles.
Maybe it fits one of those little gaps that you can't hire somebody, but you don't want to do it. And it's a tween product. You know what I mean? It's something in between. Yeah. So you got something from, is this Hannah Class?
Hannah Class. Let me scroll to the bottom of the document. So we have a LinkedIn message from Hannah Class who says, "Hi, Will. I'm a massive fan of TWIS, This Week in Sales. Our company also tried sticking the whole team on a, quote, better for everyone straight to 45K salary." And she's referring to a couple of articles that we referenced last week, where organizations tried to put sales teams on fixed salaries, the whole company on a fixed salary, thinking that everyone would be happy. And clearly that is not capitalism and people weren't happy. She goes on to say, whose salary wasn't going to change? The managing director. So I assume Hannah is in the UK over here using that term. It was squashed in the end, but I echo Victor and your thoughts on the matter. So yeah, so this must be an experiment that a reasonable amount of organizations are doing to stick everyone on a fixed salary and come by and hopefully everyone does the right amount of work and everyone kind of pulls forward when, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be very difficult to motivate people unless you're doing it financially, I think.
That's interesting. By the way, I thought we were going to get a massive amount of emails about this one, this whole base salary to make you happy. But that's interesting that in this case, they tried it, but the managing director didn't want his salary to change, which means he didn't buy into it.
Yeah.
Dan Price from the company we mentioned, he bought into it.
Yeah. When you frame it up like that, that makes total sense. You're just throwing shit down the hill as opposed to getting involved as well. And we talked about it last week. Clearly, a managing director, the value of the organization, hopefully you're going to sell it, pass it on, do something with it. That's where your payday is. I'm of the belief that, and it's subjective. I'm hesitant as I say this, but perhaps I'd rather have my sales team earn way more than me as a managing director of a small organization, knowing that I'll get a payday 10 years from now from selling the company. I don't feel like I need that cash up front. I feel like that cash as a managing director, not every time, but perhaps more often than not, should be reinvested into the organization. And that would be a smarter move, if nothing else. What do you think, Victor?
Yeah, I always thought that as a manager, and I'm talking about as a sales manager, that if I'm making more money than my salespeople, something is wrong.
Sure.
That's the way, that was my mindset. Now, I want to make more money than them, but if they're making a lot of money, they're happy and they're just going to float my boat. So that was my philosophy. How do I put a compensation plan that motivates my team, which will guarantee my success?